Can you still see that PowerPoint or did it go away?
I still see it.
You can see the PowerPoint. Is it
Yes.
on the full screen?
Yes.
Okay.
No, it has
No, it's not full screen.
It has the side of little images of
Oh,
slides.
yes,
Let me try something else. In black screen? How about that?
No, now
that has notes and
we see the presenter view.
Lisa, if you go up to the top to the display settings on this screen.
How about now?
there you go.
Yeah.
Yep,
There you go.
Great.
Nicely done.
Yeah. I don't know why. Every time sometimes it feels like I'm learning all over again. Thank you for your patience. But I think we're all here. Andrea, is everyone you need to be in the room here? Jacob, all your folks?
Yes, it looks like Jacob's here, so Judy's here.
Okay, great. Okay, so with that, I will turn it over to the chair.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I'll bring the meeting of the Planning Commission of San Carlos of December 21st, 2020 to order. We begin every meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America,
to the Republic,
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty
and justice
for all.
All right, Lisa, if I could please have a roll call.
Commissioner Bradley,
Here.
Commissioner Jacoponi,
present.
Vice Chair Roof,
Here.
and Chair Garvey.
Present. Thank you and welcome to everyone who is listening in or participating on Zoom. The next item on our agenda is public comment. I'll read a few sentences regarding the public comment period. Public comment is limited to items not on the agenda. The Commission may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed as allowed by the Brown Act. However, the Commission's general policy is to refer items to staff for attention or have a matter placed on a future Commission agenda for a more comprehensive action or report. Is there anyone in the waiting room who would like to make a public comment this evening?
And maybe I'll just check through the chair. I'll check with Sarah. Is there anyone in the waiting room? I mean, we usually will give this a minute or so to see if anybody calls in. So we'll just wait a minute then.
Sarah, is there anyone in the waiting room?
Not at this time.
All right, let's move on. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of the November 16th, 2020 meeting. Does anyone have any changes to the minutes?
Oh.
None for me.
None for me.
And none for me. All right, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I move that we approve the minutes.
All right, and I'll second that. Lisa, can I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Bradley,
Yes.
Commissioner Jacoponi,
Yes.
Vice Chair Roof,
Yes.
and Chair Garvey.
Yes. All right, our next item on the agenda is public hearing. We have two public hearings this evening. I'll read a brief opening statement that applies to both public hearings. Staff will present a report on the history, physical features, etc. on the application, followed with the staff's recommendations. The applicant will make a presentation. Thereafter, interested members of the community may speak on the proposal. When all interested parties have had an opportunity to be heard, the hearing will be closed and no further discussion on the floor can be held. The Commission will then consider the evidence and make its recommendation. If you challenge a public hearing item in court, you may be limited to raising only those issues that you or someone else raised at the public hearing described in this notice, the public notice, or in written correspondence delivered to the city at or prior to the public hearing. Speakers will be called upon by the last 3 digits of their phone number and should state their name prior to addressing the commission. This will assist staff in preparing the minutes. Our first hearing this evening, item 6A on the agenda, is consideration of the Planning Commission to adopt a resolution recommending the City Council adopt an ordinance amending the San Carlos Municipal Code sections 18.04, 18.05, 18.20, 18.23, and 18.40 to allow to help increase the number of child care facilities and spaces in San Carlos. The staff have a presentation this evening.
We do. Good evening, Chair Garvey and Commissioners. Andrea Martisich, Principal Planner. This evening, I'm going to present some proposed code updates to the municipal code specific to child care facilities. Next slide, please. Now, to give a little background on how we've arrived at the proposed changes this evening and what's really driving them. Back in 2019, we looked at what need there was within the city of San Carlos for child care spaces. Based on an analysis of supply and demand, we found that there was a need for about 1,200 preschool spaces and about 250 infant spaces. We also found that the city had about 810 spaces existing for childcare, which resulted in a shortage of a little over 600 spaces. Now, I did want to point out that this was done in October of 2019, so it's very likely that the numbers have changed at least slightly within the last year, especially because of COVID and you know, any demands that have increased or decreased because of that. But this is the most recent data we have and what we've been working with the past year or so. Next slide, please. So we have two types of child care facilities we'll be discussing this evening. The first is family child care or in-home child care. Back in 2019, when the study was done, we had about 19 in-home facilities within the city. However, they're not shown on this map because legally we're not allowed to show where they are. And I'll explain in a minute, we're now under a new law, not really allowed to know where they are as a city. But this is the last information we had about family child care. And then the second category is commercial child care, which we do have throughout the city and are shown on this map. And these are commercial daycare centers, school-age daycare centers, which are located at the public schools, and then infant commercial centers as well. Next slide, please. And then just to give a little bit of background in terms of the timeline, back in 2017, the City Council directed staff to explore some options to address what we thought was a shortage at the time. So staff presented preliminary options and strategies, and at the same time also met with the parent group and local child care providers. From mid-2019 to present is when staff's really been doing quite a bit of work on the child care initiatives. Specifically, the study that I referenced earlier was done, which verified that we were short quite a few spaces. Staff consulted with key stakeholders, including the San Mateo County and the school district. We've met several times with the City Council Subcommittee for Childcare. And just recently, we returned to City Council this past July regarding expediting the review process for childcare. And so the next slide will actually outline what we've done so far and kind of where we're at now. So City Council has waived the traffic impact fee for all commercial childcare centers. In terms of logistics, the Planning Division has streamlined the internal review process, which involves reducing timeframes for review, coming up with standard conditions of approval. One of the biggest concerns for childcare providers was not only cost of applying, but time that it takes to actually get approval. So that's something we wanted to focus on. We also designated a specific staff person to be the childcare point person for inquiries and outreach, and also stay abreast of any new laws and kind of be the department's expert, so to speak, or at least know who to reach out to with any inquiries that we can't answer ourselves. The city also completed a nexus study for an impact fee. And then we met with the Child Care Law Center to discuss proposed minor municipal code changes, as well as received quite a bit of input regarding some more substantial changes that I'll talk about in a minute. And then this evening, we're reviewing the minor code changes that I will go through in just 1 minute. Next slide, please. So before I get to that, I just also want to go over what we're anticipating to happen within the next year. So I spoke about some kind of more major zoning changes. So one thing we will be doing is studying the possibility of allowing commercial childcare centers in zoning districts where they're not currently allowed, either permitted or by conditional use permit or minor use permit. They're just outright prohibited. So as an example, that would be the GCI district, or general commercial industrial. Study the feasibility of an impact fee, which will be based on that Nexus study. Possibility of waiving fees for applications, and also reevaluating waiving the TIF fee. So something that's come up is, although that has been waived, council did express some interest in, if the city is going to waive certain fees, to have the childcare provider give something back. So that could be something like saving a few spaces specific to San Carlos residents, or accepting vouchers through a county program to help lower income residents get childcare, which doesn't, the childcare center would receive the same amount of money. It's just a voucher program. So reevaluating that a little bit to really see if there's a way we can also get some benefit for that. We will be looking at a general plan policy for childcare. There are none right now, so specifically calling it out. And then, as always, but also in the future, and with the Eastside Vision Plan, looking at development agreements and the possibility for adding childcare as a community benefit. So since 2019, Council has made this a strategic objective, and some of the other actions they would like to take is really an aggressive outreach campaign. So that will include things like a childcare website, having information nights for childcare providers and or people who are interested in becoming providers. That could include things like a parent who stays at home with their one child, maybe they take on one other child for income. So not the traditional, you have to max out the number of children at your house, but possible, flexible ideas like that. Creating a pamphlet or startup guide. And then of course, our Spotlight newsletter as well. We would also want to coordinate with the county and 4Cs, which is our child care referral agency, because they also have quite a bit of information and information nights. So be able to get the word out to our residents about, activities or events that they might have as well. Next slide, please. So to come back to our focus for this evening, just a little bit of background. As you're aware, any changes to the municipal code, specifically the zoning title, require review by the Planning Commission first for your input and then recommendation to City Council. So this evening, I've broken up the changes sort of into two different categories. The first are those that are required by state law. So I'll go into this a little bit more in depth in a minute, but those are specifically related to in-home daycares, both large and small. And then the second category is commercial childcare centers. And those ones are the ones that we're recommending. So they are not required to be done by state law, but they are actions that we felt were, we were able to sort of do an immediate proposal to them without going through a long study, such as we would need to do for, allowing it in a zoning district where it's not allowed. So really looking at what we need to do to comply with state law on one hand, and then what are some changes that we could make now that might have, substantial impact while we're going through this longer term planning process. And I'll go through each of these in the next few slides. Next slide, please. So to focus first on the in-home daycare, there's two separate categories, both small family childcare, which is allows up to 8 spaces for children. And per our code right now, this is allowed by right. The second category is large family childcare, also in home. which allows up to 14 spaces for children. Our current code says that a minor use permit is required in all cases, and it's actually not allowed in all residential districts at this time. However, a current law, and it's actually in effect now, SB 234, preempts the city from requiring a business registration or imposing a minor use permit or any kind of discretionary permit. So in effect, what that means is we cannot, as a city, require any small or large family home to, one, either register with the city. So that goes back to earlier when I was saying we might not know where a lot of them are in the future. And then the second thing is we have to allow them where residential uses are allowed anyways. Next slide, please. So staying with the in-home changes, I wanted to point out one code section, which was included in your packet, and that's Municipal Code Section 5.04. This update to this section is to exempt both small and large in-home childcare facilities from business registrations. Just a point of process, because this is not in the zoning title, Planning Commission would not make a recommendation on this one item. However, I did want to include it just so you have an overall picture of the different steps that need to be taken. And then the second part of the in-home changes is references our residential districts and our MU, which are mixed use districts. And again, this would allow any district that allows residential, we would have to allow small and large home childcare by right. So as an outright permitted use. Next slide, please. So the second category are the recommended changes to the municipal code. And these, the first part of this has to do with the residential and mixed use zoning districts. So one thing we are proposing is to allow these commercial childcare centers by right in zoning districts where they're already conditionally permitted. So again, not allowing them where they're prohibited now, but basically changing the process from either a minor use permit or conditional use permit to just outright permitted. Next slide. As part of that, if we were to allow childcare centers to be permitted outright, they would still be subject to the use standards in the municipal code. And that's section 18.23.090. And some of the changes we're proposing are listed here, and I'll just go over them briefly. The first is to remove an outdoor space requirement. So our code right now requires, I believe it's 75 square feet per child of outdoor space. The reason we are recommending removing this is that this is already regulated by the state. There's a minimum that the state requires, and any requirement they have would supersede ours just for licensing. So we just thought it would be cleaner to take this section out, especially if the state requirement changes at some point. Our code won't be, out of sync with the law. The second change is to, or proposed change is to change the allowed hours of operation from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Without needing any use permit or any special requirement for that or anything beyond just being allowed outright. Going along with that is that we would want to change the code to also say that the proposed commercial centers have to comply with the noise ordinance during those hours. Well, I should say for all hours, but we would time it to end at 10 p.m. like the noise ordinance does in terms of the louder hours that are allowed. And then again, require a minor use permit if there is a center that is like a 24-hour center or open only in the evenings for children to sleep while their parents are working. We're also proposing a new process for a parking exception. So what we're proposing is that if a commercial child care center comes in, they would have to propose both a parking plan as well as a circulation drop-off pickup plan. If they can meet our parking requirements per the code, then the staff would review just the circulation plan to make sure that seems okay. If the proposal can either, one, not meet the parking, or their circulation plan does not seem, staff feels there might be issues with it, those can be referred to the zoning administrator for public hearing and review. The current process for parking exception, there are a few different ones, but one of the ones that kind of just gives you the exception is a conditional use permit process. So this would kind of take it down one level to zoning administrator, but still allow for neighbors to comment and the public to comment. And again, even if they are meeting parking, if staff has concerns with the circulation or their drop-off plan, it can always be referred to the zoning administrator as well. So we do have some control left, especially with the two issues that usually seem to be the most contentious for neighbors and people in the area. Next slide, please. So if you decide to recommend approval, the next steps would be the City Council reviewing this item and adopting an ordinance for these changes. Their changes, again, they would be doing the business registration change as well as the zoning code changes. And then I've put the motion here, just outlining again the zoning code changes only. And then I believe that is the end of the presentation, but I am available for any questions you might have. Thank you.
Andrea, Jim Nalcapone here. Thank you very much. That was really helped connect a lot of the dots from the reading material together. You know, I guess the overarching question that I have is because in some way what you proposed seem straightforward and without much negative impact. Are there any regrets that you think that a portion of the community might have looking at anything that you've proposed? Like why isn't it sort of simple and obvious?
I think in the past, at least, the biggest concerns have come with the in-home versus the commercial childcare in terms of community concerns. And to be honest, I think that's one of the main reasons why the state has stepped in and said, you just have to allow them outright. The biggest concerns for commercial, I would also say, are kind of the circulation. You know, parents aren't stopping in neighbors' driveways or, you know, other businesses parking, things like that. So with the ability to refer items to the ZA for possibly contentious issues like that, I think that would address sort of the main concern that we've seen. Lisa, I'm not sure if you can think of any other issues that come up. From my memory, they've almost always been traffic/circulation related.
I would agree, Andrea. I think you described the concerns adequately and comprehensively.
Thank you.
Sure.
Andrea, could you clarify, David here, and thank you for a great presentation. Could you clarify the streamlined internal review that you mentioned you'd be building? Where would that apply, given that that we'd be allowing outright?
Great question, and I did sort of skip over that a bit. So even if a use is permitted outright, they still need to get a business registration. And again, this would be the commercial childcare centers, and or maybe need to do tenant improvements, which require a permit. So the expediting part would come under those two permits or reviews. So instead of taking, let's say, 30 days to review a permit, you know, we try not to, but we might, dedicating ourselves to 2-week turnaround. And then also having the same with the business registration, trying to do it very quickly. The hope is that we will be able to connect with possible centers before they actually submit, so that we've done sort of all the research and checking everything beforehand. So when they submit, it's relatively smooth. Under the minor use permit process, 1 to 3 months just for planning review, and then building permits can take another month or two. So by committing, to do a few weeks under planning and then a few weeks under building, it really helps them time-wise for that. It would not affect in-home childcare because we're not going to be able to regulate that. So it would really be specific to the commercial childcare.
Okay, thank you. And a second question, did I catch that there was a expansion of the areas of the city that one could build a commercial facility?
So not yet. The only thing we're proposing tonight is if a commercial childcare center is allowed with a use permit or minor use permit, changing that to permitted outright. The bigger conversation that is coming is does the city want to allow childcare in districts where it's not currently allowed? So that would be, for example, like general commercial, industrial. It's a bigger conversation for a couple of reasons. One, because of the city's priority to help, preserve industrial space, but also children are what we consider sensitive receptors. And so there's certain areas that either best practices regulate or certain laws regulate that prohibit you from putting these sensitive receptors, which are children, elderly, I'm sure other groups, but near uses that could harm them. So for example, we wouldn't want a childcare center right next to a polluting industrial use, for example. So it's going to be a balance of kind of figuring out where might be a good fit for them, where they're not going to be harmed by a nearby use or prohibit an industrial use from moving in that we might want as well. So it's definitely a more complex question, I think.
Okay, yeah, that sounds important given the new buildings going up, the
Exactly.
biotech buildings, because often it's nice to have a commercial facility to serve those businesses. But
yeah,
well, guess we'll hear about that more later.
Well, and I think too, and Lisa, please jump in since you're the manager of it. But with our East Side Vision Plan, which is looking at community benefits in that area or specific development agreements, that's something that could possibly be allowed through those mechanisms as well.
Yeah, that sounds good.
This is Ellen. I had a couple of questions. It seems like we are short by a fair amount in the amount of childcare spaces we are able as a community to provide. What's your sense of where is the level of interest in expanding these? Is it in the residential side, or are you hearing more interest from the commercial side as far as really wanting to expand and really hoping and waiting for this more streamlined process?
We have heard from both, but I would say they have different sort of issues. The commercial side, one of their biggest problems has been finding affordable space to rent. The districts where they're allowed right now, which are the mixed use, and some residential are traditionally more expensive to rent out. So the inquiries we have gotten, and again, this was pre-COVID, were spaces where the use was not permitted because it was an industrial district, which had lower rents and something they can afford. For the ones that were able to find a spot, we had one recently, or I should say a year or two ago, on the south end of Laurel. Their concern was cost for just developing the project, the traffic impact fee, which eventually got waived for them, and the time. The time was a real big issue for them because the amount of time it took from them to start to even be able to accept children was quite a while. On the in-home side, there, I believe, is sort of, and not unique to San Carlos, but in the past, there's been a lot of kind of hoops to jump through. So we used to have a minor use permit requirement for large daycare. And those, I would say, were probably the most contentious public hearings we had for the in-home. And again, that was due to neighbors' concerns about traffic and parking. So I think for that group, outreach and education will be really important because some people we know have remained as small daycare because they wanted to just avoid the process of moving up to large. So being able to do outreach to say, now you can do it without the hearing. Also trying to come up with more creative ideas for in-home care. So I mentioned maybe, watching 1 or 2 children and making an income off that, but also filling a few spaces. So on that side, the concern was, I think, 1, cost, but 2, just the neighborhood feedback and the feeling that they weren't going to be able to maybe not get it approved, but just the process itself was longer and more contentious. So I think responding to that group will be a lot more kind of the outreach, whereas the daycare centers are a little bit more, focused on time and money.
Okay, that makes sense. And then building on that, I was reading in the packet about outreach to schools and churches. That also seemed a good idea. Is that part of this phase of the project, or do you see that happening at some point in the future?
I would say formally in the future, but we have started outreach with both the district and the county. So we have spoken with the superintendent, and again, this was before COVID, about kind of facilities on site, the possibility of, expanding daycare because they do have some there. We've spoken with the county about different things that they've seen in different cities that might work for us, or just, providing us with resources. So for example, Redwood City has a child care coordinator. That's their job, specific to child care. And so, being able to connect us with that person or with the Child Care Law Center, who advocates for in-home care. So we have made connections. I did run these proposed changes by both the Child Care Law Center and the county to see if they had any feedback. And they both, thought the changes were good. But I think that we'll probably be meeting with them more strategically in the future when we're talking about these larger initiatives, outreach, possible zoning changes, than what's been going on now. But we have made the connections, and we have had quite a few discussions, and it's been really helpful to work with them.
All right, thank you. Any other questions of staff?
Yeah, Bradley here. First, thank you, Andrea, for a very informative presentation, and thank my fellow commissioners for some very good questions. I'm very supportive of additional child care opportunities and projects. I can just see some negative backlash from the area of starting new commercial child care facilities in single-family neighborhoods. But I'm very supportive of putting them in commercial and with some restrictions in semi-industrial research areas too, and particularly multiple family. But to start new commercial facilities in single family neighborhoods and reduce the streamline getting the process approvals quicker is good, but I can see that people will be infuriated by the fact they don't have any input, and especially if they get the idea that the state is mandating this, something like Senate Bill 50. I think the staff is going to be disrespected in a lot of ways in the Planning Commission too, and the City Council, of course. So I look ahead to hearing some negative backlash.
And through the chair, just to clarify, so Commissioner Bradley's right about the state mandate for in-home large and small being allowed in any residential district. At this time, for commercial daycare, staff is only proposing to allow it outright in the RM 59 districts, which are the medium to higher density multifamily districts, but still making it prohibited in RS3, RS6, and RM20, so the lower density districts. So that's something that we wouldn't want to propose, obviously, without, as Commissioner Bradley mentioned, a lot of input and feedback from neighbors. So at this point, it's still just the RM59 that we're proposing it to be permitted.
My blood pressure just went down a few notches. Thank you.
Good.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Bradley. Any other questions from commissioners of staff before we see who is in the waiting room? And if you're thinking of calling in on this item, this is a good time to pick up the phone and call. In the meantime, any other questions of Andrea? All right, hearing none, let's look at the waiting room. Sarah, is there anyone in the waiting room who is wishing to speak on this item?
Yes, we do. David, you're able to unmute yourself?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, my name is David Tusman. I'm a resident in San Carlos. I'm going to say that I think it's great what's going on with helping to allow more important community facilities like childcare, streamline and relieve the hurdles and the delays that a lot of community review can often cause. And I think it's a clear example that there's too much of that to block these important facilities, in that the state has now enforced the town to allow by right in-home daycare. And I think it's good to have those sort of facilities, both in-home daycare and so-called commercial daycare. I think that should be throughout the town, both in commercial and multifamily, and also single family. The word family is in that zoning, and I think childcare is an important part of a family resource. And so I look forward to the commission continuing to make it easier and quicker to get those really sorely needed facilities into our community. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, David. Sarah, is there anyone else who'd like to make a comment this evening on this item?
Not at this time.
All right, hearing that, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing. And everyone can please still follow along on the Zoom call. We're just closing the public hearing.
Bradley moves to close the public hearing at this time.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Bradley,
Yes.
Commissioner Jacoponi,
Yes.
Vice Chair Roof,
Yes.
and Chair Garvey.
Yes. All right, we've heard from staff and the public. I'll now open up the meeting for discussion amongst commissioners. Who would like to start?
Well, Bradley will just say I voiced most of my concerns in my little speech before, so I don't have much to offer other than I do strongly support more child care facilities placed with care in the community, so that people still have a voice somehow in their development. Thank you.
I would say that I too strongly support child care, being able to expand child care in San Carlos, and particularly helping to decrease the burden for both residential as well as commercial child care facilities who want to come in, and making the review process and the approval process more streamlined. I liked those ideas.
And I'll chime in. I also strongly support the goal of increasing the available child care in our city. That really speaks to the quality of life for our residents and for people who work here. So it seems like a pretty reasonable set of a good step in the right direction. And as far as expanding the opportunity for commercial facilities, I think that seems like a really good idea. You'd certainly want to be able to review that on a case-by-case basis if you're going to be out of the high-density residential area. But that doesn't mean that we wouldn't be open to it if it makes sense.
I would actually build on David's comments. I think they're quite aligned with mine. Supportive of the change. It's not only the right message, but the right action for supporting a healthy and growing community. I think the learning for me in this process was the way, I'll call it, family child care is encouraged versus commercial childcare. And I think that will be an important point. It strikes me as an important distinction for our community when we market what it is we're doing as San Carlos, because I think as has been pointed out and by our one guest speaker talking about what the state has mandated or given license to, versus what we as a city are managing are now in different categories. So just therefore help the community appreciate there are two approaches, commercial and family, and the rules are indeed different, feels wise. So that's just a bit of commentary. I'm supportive of what's been proposed, and again, would thank Andrea for a good presentation.
All right, thank you for those comments, and I'll entertain a motion on this issue if the commission is ready.
I can do that.
I'd like one
okay.
more comment.
Yes, Tom.
Didn't mean to interrupt you. It was too small a print for me to read, but in the last page of the project proposals, adjacent cities have dealt with this, and I couldn't read some of the details. Could somebody on staff briefly elaborate on those if they're in line with us, or I guess they're ahead of us already, what they're doing?
So I will start with that, and then we also have Sajudi Hawk here, who's our management analyst, who got all of this information for us. I will say that there's definitely aspects where other cities might be a little bit more progressive than us. However, with the changing of commercial childcare centers from a minor or conditional to permitted use, I don't believe any other cities have that. Most of them do have some sort of public hearing process for the commercial centers. So Judy, could you confirm if that's correct, or if there are maybe a few that do allow them outright?
Yeah, so the neighboring cities that we looked at, you're correct. We would be, setting precedent by doing the change in the permitting requirements. However, cities like San Mateo and Redwood City have really great informational resources on their website. They have more than one dedicated staff, brochures and educational materials that also really help facilitate more childcare spaces. And we also looked at Burlingame and some of the other cities where they're a little bit less flexible, and they're also looking into how to update their codes because it's a county issue, right? But Andrea, you're correct.
Thank you. So helpful.
All right, I would entertain a motion on this issue. Commissioner Roof?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I move that the Planning Commission adopt the resolution recommending the City Council adopt an ordinance updating the San Carlos Municipal Code sections 18.04, 18.05, 18.20, 18.23, and 18.40 to help increase the number of child care facilities and spaces in San Carlos.
I will second that.
I will second.
Lisa, a roll call, please.
Commissioner Bradley,
Yes.
Commissioner Iacopone,
Yes.
Vice Chair Ruth,
Yes.
and Chair Garvey.
Yes. Thank you. And thank you, Andrea, for an excellent presentation. As Commissioner Iacopone said, it really helped me also connect a lot of the dots on this issue. And I really thought it was a well laid out presentation. And I also did like that chart where they talked about, even though it was really small font, what our neighboring cities are doing. Thank you for that.
Thank you. We can make sure when we come back for anything in the future, we have it in a bigger, more legible font that can be printed as well.
All right, thank you. Moving on now to the second public hearing. This public hearing is for 518 Winding Way, APN 049-141-750, PLN 2019-00178. Request for design review approval to construct a new residence, including a request for a variance from the natural state requirement, a waiver for overall height, and a protected tree removal permit to remove 16 protected trees, a master development plan, and lot line adjustments for 5 single-family residential lots were previously approved for this site. Lisa, is there a staff presentation?
Yes, we are going to be having our contract planner, Jacob Garcia from Good City Company, present this project this evening. So I'd like to welcome Jacob to the commission. I think this is your first appearance here this evening, if I'm correct.
Yes, that's true.
Well, welcome, Jacob. You can go ahead and take it from here.
Great, thank you so much. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Jacob Garcia. I'm a contract associate planner in the planning division. The item before you this evening, item 6B, is a request for design review approval for a new residence at 518 Winding Way. In addition to this design review, the project also requests a waiver for overall height, a variance from the natural state, and a removal of 16 protected trees. Next slide, please. Thank you. The location. So the project is located in a canyon at the existing end of Winding Way on one side and near Chesham Avenue on the other side. The parcel highlighted in blue is a part of a larger 3.41 acre site. The site is bordered by open space in unincorporated San Mateo County. There are several houses located uphill from the site, and this portion of the road of Winding Way is currently under construction. Next slide, please. The history of the project, as some of you may have learned before, the site was annexed into the city in 2009. One of the conditions of approval tied to this annexation was to prepare and adopt a master development plan for the entire 3.41 acre site. This master plan was adopted by the City Council in September of 2018, and the adopted master development plan presents 4 of the 5 parcels designed as downhill style residences, with the garage constructed at street level and the living areas of the house located below the garage. As there's a creek at the rear of the properties, this would result in new houses being located above and away from the creek and taking access from the eastern portion of the Winding Way. The remaining 5th house would be constructed as an uphill style unit and is also away from the creek. 5 lots, that's 5 lots, and 4 of them downhill, 1 of them uphill. Next slide, please. The master development plan and previous conditions of approval essentially require that the minimum lot size be 20,000 square feet for each of the lots, and that each of the lots have 2 paved off-site guest parking spaces, and the houses are built in the general location as shown on the map of the master development plan, and that no development area are included for the purpose of the creek setback, as well as mitigation measures for any on-site sensitive species. Next slide, please. The project site description includes, or for 518 Winding Way, is that it's an undeveloped downhill lot. Its zoning is RS3 zoning, and it's located within the Hillside Overlay District, as well as the Stream Development and Maintenance Overlay District. In the general plan, it's marked for single family low density. This is a summary of the required and proposed development standards for 518 Winding Way. As you can see, the proposed site complies with the development standards set forth, with the exception of the overall height and the natural state requirement. These are the basis for the requested waiver and variance to be discussed in the upcoming slides. The applicant is requesting design review approval for a 4,008 square foot multi-level single family residence. There are 16 protected trees proposed for removal, with 15 new trees proposed for replanting. This is a street view rendering of 518 Winding Way. Next slide, please. This is the partial site plan focused on the location of the proposed residence on the eastern side of the property. Next slide, please. Going to the floor plans, the applicant is proposing a new multi-level residence. The house will step down the hillside and only the garage will be visible from the street. Due to the configuration of the garage, there's no access from the garage to the main house, and it is considered an accessory structure. Next slide, please. On the communal living space labeled upper level consists of an entry room loft with a small staircase leading to the dining room, kitchen area with an attached nook, family room, and a large terrace, which is located off the back of the residence. Interior stairs are located in the center of the house and lead down to the lower level. Next slide, please. At this lower level, the applicant is proposing 4 bedrooms, including a master suite, as well as 4 bathrooms and a laundry room. There's a large terrace at the rear, which extends the length of the residence. Next slide, please. This is the front elevation for the new residence, and the yellow line demonstrates the profile of the road at Winding Way. Next slide, please. Once again, here's the front rendering. The main body of the new residence is proposed to be in stucco in a gray color called City Dweller. Dark cedar siding is proposed as accents along the facade of the residence, and the fascia, windows, and metal guardrails will be black. TPO roofing is proposed to be in an old zinc gray color. Next slide, please. Here's the rear elevation of the proposed residence. Next slide, please. This shows the same rear elevation rendering and the downhill face of the proposed residence. Next slide, please. This would be the left side elevation. Next slide, please. And this is the right side elevation. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk about the waiver and variance request for the overall height and natural state of the property. Going first to the overall height waiver request. The applicant is requesting a height waiver to allow deviation from the overall height of 35 feet. The municipal code allows this deviation for up to 10% of the requirement, and the applicant is requesting an overall height of 38.5 feet. As you can see in the slide, we have the orange line indicating the allowable height at 35 feet, and the blue line showing the requested proposed height of 38.5 feet. The slope of the property has a direct impact on the height of the residence, and per the municipal code, a maximum natural state area of 85% is required. The area that counts against natural state includes not only the footprint of the residence, but also the driveway, retaining walls, paving, light wells, and anything else that is considered development. The greater the requirement for natural state, the less allowable area for the footprint of the residence, and the more likely the height and number of stories would have to increase. Further, staff requested that the roof have attractive gravel or similar as it is visible from the roadway. This requires a minor increase in height to create a parapet to contain this material. Next slide, please. Going to the variance request for the natural state, the applicant is requesting a variance from the natural state requirement, which is found in the Hillside Overlay District. Based on that requirement, 85% of the lot would be required to be in that natural state. This would mean that no structures, paving, or any disturbance of the land would occur within this area, and that maximum allowed disturbed area is 15%, or 3,447 square feet. However, as the diagram on the slide shows, just the parking and stormwater measures alone exceed the maximum disturbed area. Therefore, a variance is needed to build any sort of residence beyond the garage, guest parking, and stormwater requirements. Next slide, please. If the variance is approved, the applicant will be able to maintain 62.7% of the lot in a natural state, as shown in this slide. Next slide, please. The applicant is proposing the removal of 16 protected trees, coast live oak trees ranging in sizes of 12 inches to 28 inches in diameter. The trees are shown in this slide with a red X. The arborist notes that the trees proposed for removal are limited to those necessary to allow the construction of the residence. There are 23 additional trees on site that would remain, and the applicant is proposing 15 new trees, 3 of which are street oriented, and the others are to be planted between the side property lines and the main residence. Per the approved master development plan, existing trees at 518 Winding Way are noted to be preserved through the roadway construction and may be removed depending on the final house design. So based on this final house design, they are proposing to remove the 16 trees. Next slide, please. The community outreach conducted by the developer and by the city. The applicant held a neighborhood meeting on December 16th and mailed plans and information to neighbors within the 300-foot radius of the project site on November 30th. 2 neighbors attended the meeting and no concerns were raised regarding the new residence. The city mailed a notice to all property owners and occupants within 300 feet of the site on December 8th to notify them of the public hearing and publish a notice in the newspaper. And they published a notice in the newspaper on December 10th. No comments have been received to date. And then staff is available for questions, as is the applicant team. I believe we have the owner, architect, and arborist available for any questions that you may have. I yield back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacob. That was an excellent presentation. Are there any questions of Jacob before we see if the applicant would like to say a few words? I'll jump in. Jacob, I had a question about the trees, a tree that was going to be removed. You showed a graphic in my large pile of plans that I have right next to me at the table. I think it's AO. Yes, this. A lot of these trees made sense to be removed because the house is going there. There is a 30-inch oak tree, according to Plan AO that I read. It's sort of it's that X that's in the bottom left-hand corner. Can you tell me why that is being removed? It seems like it's a large tree, if I've read the graphic correctly, and it's not that close to the house. And part of what I'm leading up to is I don't want to take out a tree if we don't have to. Part of what I'm saying also is this is a big slope. I do think about that creek at the bottom and erosion control, and the more trees that we take out, the bigger the issue for erosion control comes to the forefront of my mind. Can you, or possibly the applicant's arborist, maybe we can hear from him or her later, help me understand why that big tree is being removed?
Yes, from my understanding, the tree is marked for removal in order to allow for the stormwater requirements, but I would like to open it up to the project arborist to speak more directly to that tree in particular. And I believe John McClanahan is on the call in order, maybe as an attendee.
Maybe it's more appropriate that we hold off on John and we can bring him and the applicant in when we're done asking questions. That's fine. That's fine with me. A second question, you mentioned there were 3 new street-oriented trees. I recall looking at 3 previous houses in this development at previous times in the Planning Commission. Can you refresh my memory? Are these 3 new trees consistent with the number of new trees that are in front of the other 3 new houses that we've already approved? It seems to me there were new trees planted at the other houses as well. And I think there were 2 or 3 of them at those houses also.
I haven't personally reviewed all of those projects, so I can't speak directly to the street-oriented trees proposed for planting, but perhaps the project architect or applicant team could speak to that more directly as well.
Okay, thank you. That would be fine. And my last question, I'm still thinking about storm drains and the creek. Maybe that's because we've had no rain. We've approved 3 houses and we have a creek at the bottom. And I can't ask you, well, how did the storm drain system work after all the storms we've had? Because we haven't had any storms. How confident are you that the storm water setup that we have here is going to work or is functioning? Is there a way to test that, or do we have to get a separate permit for that? How does that work?
A part of the requirements for building permit is the applicant will prepare an erosion control plan that is directly associated with the site. So they will be implementing best construction management practices to reduce and minimize and mitigate for all stormwater pollution and prevention on site. The city does conduct inspections throughout the winter season in order to ensure that these erosion control methods are in place, and they are required by the county and state requirements. So any potential erosion control will be identified and mitigated for. And so I don't think that this will be a worry here as they do have to plan for that.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you for that. Any questions from fellow commissioners of Jacob before we ask the applicant to come forward and make a few statements?
I don't have any further questions at this time, but I just want to welcome Jacob and also thank you for your presentation. Very well done.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jacob. And Chair Garvey, you asked about the tree that I was wondering about, so handled my question. Thank you.
All right, hearing no further questions, if the applicant would like to come forward and say a few things and maybe bring the arborist with them, that would be helpful. Thank you. And you may be muted. We're not able to hear you.
Well, I'm John McClenahan, the arborist. Good evening, commissioners. I think it would probably be helpful for Ron to chime in on the removal of the tree that you're questioning. I can say from an arborist point of view, it's a very unusual site in that it's virtually inaccessible by pedestrian right now because it's covered in brush and understory right there. So I can say that most likely the storm drain is in conflict with that tree and you can't have both based on the way this seems to be working with Ron.
I see. So when the storm drain, where the storm drain needs to go, you can't have a tree there. That's what the conflict is.
Well, I think the conflict is typically in the excavation and grading that goes involved in installing the drainage and the stormwater management. So I would say that it's probably better to have everything closer to the top, make them replant some more trees down the hill and keep all of the other trees down below in their natural state or a more natural state.
This is Greg Kawahara, the architect, and I'd like to add some context to as well about that 30-inch tree that's being questioned. if you go to sheet C3 of the civil drawings, which is also packet page 85, that shows the footprint of the residence along with all the stormwater features designed by the civil engineer. Now those features are not shown in any of the architectural site plans, it's only on the civil drawings. So if you could go to that page, I think it would help you understand all of the stormwater piping and features that lead to that 30-inch tree needing its removal.
Okay, so this graphic that's up, is this the graphic you're referring to? I'm looking in my packet for page 85. I'm not there yet.
Okay, yeah, it is not. Yeah. Or if you go to the big sheets, it'd be sheet C3 near the last quarter of the set.
Greg, Jim Iacopone here. I mean, it strikes me that there is such very good slope to facilitate drainage that I guess my fundamental question is, and since the contours are effectively across the property, is it possible actually to shift what looks like, that I can't exactly read what it is, but some kind of an outfall structure that might be in conflict with a tree? I mean, could it be effectively relocated left or right? In other words, could we be considering a modest design change which would preserve the tree and yet accomplish the exact same objective with regard to stormwater handling?
Well, as I look at that sheet C3 and see the location of 30-inch oak, I don't have a scale here, but I would say within 10 feet of the trunk on both sides, there is piping coming from two biotreatment areas. The biotreatment areas are these planar type features where all the stormwater from the impervious area is piped to, and it's filtered through this special soil and the special landscaping. And at the bottom of those two features, which are on either side of the tree in the parallel to the contour, that gets piped to a solid, it's called an HD, basically a plastic pipe that has 24 inches in diameter. So when you have these big rainstorm events, all the water goes in downspouts, first goes to these filtration features. There's two of them. And then as it helps clean it, it goes to this basically a big storage pipe to slowly dissipate all the rainwater down into the creek area. And according to the Arborist report, the roots for all these trees is much larger than as large or larger than the canopy. So as that excavation would need to occur for those underground pipes, a lot of the major roots would probably be damaged enough that it warrants removal of the tree. I don't know, are you on packet page 85?
For my part, I am, yes, thank you. And
okay.
I do see the tree, and I see that it is kind of in the middle of what appears to be a V. And I'm just, you know, my eye just wonders if the, I'm not sure what you called the structure, but the one on the left-hand side, or maybe it's the east-hand side, I'll get the direction wrong. In other words, is there flexibility to accomplish both? And I guess like Chair Garvey, if this is only a modest relocation that actually broadly doesn't impact cost, if we could preserve a tree, it would be great, especially one of the scale that we're speaking of.
Right now, I don't see it because of the wood rat mitigation boundary line. We're actually limited of where we can put these features. Ron, are you on the line? I can hear you.
Ron, you may be on mute.
Unmute. How's that?
Perfect. Ron, we can hear you.
Thanks. I'm Ron Grove, and I'm the developer up here, and we've met a few times. I want to point out a couple things. One of the things on the staff report, it said there was 23 trees remaining. I think there's a small error. There's 28 trees remaining. So there's a few more than we thought. The previous 3 lots, we didn't remove any trees because there really isn't any trees on the other sites. When we put the road in, I think we were slated to remove 23 trees when we put the original road in, and we managed to avoid taking out about 5 of them, or not taking out about 5 of them. So we really only removed, I think, like 18 trees. So trees for us are really important. I mean, I'll keep every tree we possibly can. But with the state regulations requiring this stormwater treatment and this bioswale stuff that we have to do, there's literally no room. And then we're pushed up against that 25-foot setback for the wood rat. We've literally used the whole envelope there to do what we can. With the hillside regulations and trying to stay inside that natural state, as Jacob said and described to you guys, that basically by the time we build the retaining walls, we build the garage, we build the off-street parking, literally by the hillside rules, we can't even build a house. We've exceeded the natural state. So we've done everything we can to try and compact everything we can in that area. Dan McLeod's a civil engineer, and he pushed those bioswales around and the storm treatment centers every way he could to try and avoid disrupting any more area than we have to. But we're subject to that regulation from the state, and I don't know if you guys have seen them lately, but the house I just built, I mean, these detention centers now for this rainwater are costing about 150 grand. It's crazy the stuff we're doing now for these systems. I mean, they're sticking out of the ground with concrete walls 5 feet in the air on those 60% slopes, and they're literally 50 feet long. So with the state regulations, there's really no way around it. In the old days, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, we could have gone away with none of that. We could have kept all those trees and we wouldn't have had to do those big bioswales and treatment centers. But with today's rules, that's what we're left with.
If we can go back to graphic A0, which shows that, Ron Grove, can you address, there's 2 other trees that are up there. One's a 15-inch, I think, and one's a 17-inch that are on the other side of the property that are near the house. But yeah, those 2, is it the same? I was going to ask about those, but they weren't as important to me as the 30-inch tree. But from what I hear you saying, the reason possibly that those trees have to be removed is the same issue that you're explaining? They are.
So if you're looking at that grid line, like 350 to 355, I mean, we've got those storm drain and those biotreatment centers tucked in there as tight as we can get on that slope and as tight to the house as we can get. And with that 60% slope, I mean, it's hard enough to build a house on, let alone a detention center down there. Dan did everything he could to avoid it, but there's no way around it. It won't fit on the lot. We can't get storm drain in there without it.
I hear what you're saying. I wasn't aware of that. I appreciate the clarification.
Yeah, it's just the rules nowadays really make it tough.
While we have Ron on there for questions, I have a question about the natural state. We're asking for a obviously that area has to be increased beyond the standard in order to build on the site. So I get that, but the area that's disturbed, including these fancy storm drains, what's going to be done to restore that to be something that maybe it won't count as natural state, but something that looks better than concrete structures and the like?
I think there's a landscape plan attached to your pamphlet. I don't have it in front of me, but Greg might be able to help us out on what page that is. But we built a lot of homes in the area and a lot of homes in San Carlos. And we want to plant as many plants and trees as we can to keep these things as tight and quiet as possible. The landscaping on these things are designed to hide the walls and to hide the mass. The reason for the big decks on these things is because you really don't have any outside living anymore. You can't get down that slope. So we're going to put planters on the decks as we do on the apartment systems down in downtown San Carlos as well. But I think we'll be able to hide it pretty well. And that lot, like I said, has 28 more trees on that, 28 existing trees after we remove the 16. You're not going to be able to see that house from the bottom road driving up the driveway or the road. And you certainly won't see them from, you won't be able to see anything from the top because you're only going to look at basically roof and garage. The sides of both lots, every one of these lots we're doing on the property lines, we plant them pretty heavy just for privacy from the other houses. So I don't think there'll be a big issue with seeing concrete and big retaining walls.
Ron, this is Ellen with a follow-up question. I know that you have been here in the past and three previous pieces of property have been approved for similar kinds of housing developments. I'm curious, has anything come up with those three previous houses that has informed anything different that you've done with this fourth house, or is everything progressing pretty much according to plan?
Well, everything's really good on this whole project. I had a setback today. Cal Water came up and did a flow test and dumped 10,000 gallons of water on that gravel road that we haven't paved yet. And so it made quite a mess that we're cleaning up. But besides that, PG&E with the holdup for the electric, we've been waiting for 1.5 years just for electricity on this job. And they still haven't come through yet, so we can't pave it until we get our electric. So with those two things in mind, everything else has been going great. And actually a sewer, we have an issue with the sewer connection between the city and the county are trying to decide how they want to split up who's going to be responsible for the sewer connection at the bottom of the road. But other than that, the project's going great. The neighbors are really, really cooperative. They started out really not really into it, and now they're like, "Gosh, when are you guys going to finish? We just want you to hurry up and get it done." And I said, "Well, we're going to the meeting here, and hopefully we push these last ones along."
All right, thank you for that. Any other questions of staff or Ron or the arborist or the architect before we see if there's anyone from the public who would like to speak?
I just have a comment. It's Don again. Thanks, Ron, for your presentation, and I want to compliment the architect, Greg. I'm a fan of modern and contemporary architecture, having gone to architecture school in the 50s. Good job. It's just unfortunate that people, although there are not many travelers through Winding Way any time, that's all that we'll see is the rooftop and the garage, unfortunately. But the rear elevation, maybe, I'm not sure if the people over in the new subdivision, those big houses, will be able to see that elevation, but I hope they can. Thank you.
Yes, along those lines, I also thought the design was quite attractive. And and we have to give a variance on the height, but it seems like the visual impact of this house is as modest as one could imagine. A very, very low impact given the configuration that the house is built down along the hillside. So, looks like a really nice design. I also wanted to say, I heard you say you managed to save some extra trees during the road building, and that's really wonderful. I'm glad you're doing as much as you can there.
And building on those comments, I did hear, I believe it was staff say that the slope regarding the waiver for the height, the slope affects what the height is. So the roof parapet is needed also given the type of roof it is. So it seems reasonable that the waiver would be needed given the slope of the property. Let's, hearing no further questions, let's go to the waiting room. Sarah, is there anyone in the waiting room that would like to speak on this issue?
Currently not at this time.
All right, then I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing. And if you're following along on Zoom, you can still follow along. We're just going to close the public hearing.
David here. I move that we close the public hearing.
Capone, second.
Bradley will second.
Commissioner Bradley?
Yes.
Commissioner Jacopone?
Yes.
Vice Chair Roof?
Yes.
And Chair Garvey?
Yes. All right, we have heard from staff. We've heard from the applicant and the architect and their arborist. I'll now open up the meeting for discussion amongst commissioners. Who would like to start?
I'll go ahead, Bradley, and trumpet what I said before. I think it's a handsome architectural statement on a very challenging site. Even though it's large, I think they did an outstanding job on trying to reduce excavation and provided a handsome architectural statement and should fit in with other structures, as few as there are up in that area. And I live on top of the ridge in the condos, so I'll look forward to looking down and perhaps seeing the rooftop if this project is approved, which I hope it will be. Thank you.
David Roof here. I'd like to chime in that the waiver for the overall height and the variance for the natural state requirement seem pretty consistent and reasonable given the terrain that they're building on there, and the impact of those deviations are not going to have a big impact on how that area looks as you drive by or from a distance. And so they seem pretty modest and reasonable to me, given the imperative of the site conditions.
David, I think you've for my part captured what was on my mind when I looked at the elevation lines going from, I think, 290 down at the creek to about 400 up at the street level, and that's a lot of elevation gain or loss, and therefore unusual lot, and therefore exactly as you say, real reason for accommodating what will be another very nice residence in the development, and in a way that's not very impactful. and thank you to the team for sharing back the rationale around the big oak tree. I always hate to see a 30-inch oak be lost, but I do appreciate that they've worked the design as best they think they can, and so I'll take that at face value. And so good-looking project. The variance and natural state waivers seem reasonable, just as my colleagues have said before.
And I will echo the comments of my colleagues. I also agree that the waiver request and the variance request seem reasonable. And I also really like the design of the home. I think it's going to be an extremely attractive home. The previous homes were equally attractive, and I think it's going to be a very nice development. And I too appreciated the comments on the 30-inch oak tree. It sounds like you tried to do what you could, but given the stormwater requirements, there was some conflict there that needed to be resolved, and it's resolved by removing the tree. I appreciated the discussion on that. If there are no other comments, I will entertain a motion on this issue.
All right, I, Bradley, move that the Planning Commission approve the code compliance certificate for a residence, approve the waiver for the overall height of the residence, and a variance for the natural state requirement, and the removal of 16 protected trees as outlined in the report, and variance of the code compliance certificate at 518 Winding Way, APN 049141750, based on the findings and further reasons incorporated in the staff report, and as conditions of waiver, variance, and code compliance certificate.
I will second.
Commissioner Bradley?
Yes.
Commissioner Iacopone?
Yes.
Vice Chair Roof?
Yes.
And Chair Garvey?
Yes. All right, thank you. Well, before we move on, congratulations to the applicant. Good luck in this next phase of your project. I know this has been in the works for a long time, and a lot of work has been done by many people. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so moving on to our next item, item 7A, report on recent city council actions. Lisa, do you have anything for us this evening?
Nothing this evening other than what the commission may have already heard and know, which is our new mayor is Laura Palmer Lohan. And then, of course, the election results were certified, and now former Commissioner John Dugan is now officially a city council member. So, and then new appointments for city council subcommittees will be made at their meeting. I think it's the January 11th. So other than that, nothing to report for city council.
All right. Planning Commission comments or reports. Yes, just to piggyback on council member John Dugan, I watched him get sworn in. It was very exciting. I saw him on local TV, and it was very exciting. And John, I'm very proud of you and looking forward to watching the city council meetings. I had one item to report out on. On November 30th, I attended virtually a workshop held by the city. This was a workshop on the focused general plan update, which includes an update for housing as well as environmental safety. This was a well-attended workshop that was very well facilitated, and they used some new virtual tools, real-time polls, ways to get people to type in thoughts and opinions quickly, put them up on a virtual whiteboard. I was very pleased with the new use of virtual tools for this workshop. But generally, it was just really well attended, and I'm glad I participated. I wasn't able to see everyone who was there, and maybe some of my fellow commissioners were also there. That's all I have.
And through the chair, moving on to item number C, correspondence. There's no correspondence that we have for the commission this evening. And then I can just move on again to item number D, planning staff comments, reports, and updates of projects. So just looking ahead at the schedule as we move into the new year, we typically cancel the first meeting in January because it's right after the city furlough period. And it makes it a bit challenging to get all the staff reports and noticing and practical matters completed while we're on that break. So we won't have the meeting on January 4th. And at this point, it looks like we don't have any items that are ready to be presented to the commission on the subsequent meeting, which would have been on a Tuesday, January 19th. So most likely we're going to be canceling both of those meetings for the month of January. But I will say there is a lot going on, which I'll talk about in just a moment. So even though we won't have commission meetings, there'll be other things happening just to sort of keep the commission apprised of. But before I get into those projects, I just wanted to give a brief overview and update of the recruitment for a new planning commissioner. And so some of you may know that the applications to fill former Commissioner Dugan's Planning Commission seat, those applications went live on December the 7th. And on January 8th, that would be the due date for applications to the Planning Commission. And I just checked with the city clerk this afternoon. And so far, we only have one application. And our protocol is really to collect at least 15 applicants to choose from. So what happens if we don't have enough? Well, then the period for accepting applications is then just simply extended. So unless we get an influx of applications by January 8th, it could be that we have to extend that deadline. But looking at the schedule, if we do get 15 applications by that point, and we'll do more outreach and marketing for that in between, then the council interviews would be set for January 27th with a really quick turnaround for an orientation so that that new person could take their seat in theory at the first meeting in February, which would be Monday, February the 1st, 2021. So, but that remains to be seen because, again, at this point, we only have just one. So we'll see what transpires between now and then. And we'll keep the commission posted. We can send out informational material as well. And in addition, if there's an opportunity to do a very brief meet and greet prior to the next commission date or maybe via a special meeting, we'll look at that opportunity as well. I know it's nice to have, I remember the days where we had the meet and greets prior to the meetings where it was very nice. We had refreshments, we had a chance to mingle a little bit, but now things are changing, have changed, right? So we'll look to see what we can accommodate via an online platform for that forthcoming new member when eventually that occurs. So just wanted to give you a brief update on that. And then other things happening, like Chair Garvey mentioned, we are moving onward with our process for civic engagement for the Focus General Plan update. We did have, in my mind, what turned out to be a very successful first workshop on November the 30th. And for those of you that may not have attended, but are curious to kind of hear, what some community members are saying, I would encourage you to go to the project website, which is www.sancarlos2040.org. So sancarlos2040.org. And when you go there, you can click on the link to that first community workshop of November 30th. We have the actual meeting, the Zoom meeting. It was recorded, so you can hear the playback from the website. You can also click on a link to get access to the chat. So we had an online chat going throughout the meeting, so you kind of can hear the impressions and comments and questions from those that participated in the chat. And then, like Ellen said, we used a digital whiteboard called Mural to collect a lot of comments and feedback from the community. And that document, the Mural comments, the recording of that, or I should say it's not actually a recording, but it's the documentation of that activity, is now available on the website as well. So it'll be a great place to kind of keep a pulse on what's happening with that project. And then, of course, as it draws near and we get to some decision points, we can have a study session with the Planning Commission. But at least this is a good way to sort of see what the movement has been like. And then we're working to prepare for our second workshop. So our first workshop was just an introduction. The second one, we want to start talking about perhaps some criteria or guiding principles and what those should be in terms of placement of new units in the city to the year 2031. And again, what we're looking at is approximately 2,393 new units, consisting of below market rate levels and then above market rate levels, and where should those go? So we want to kind of dive into that piece of the conversation at our next workshop, which will be in January. We did initially identify January 20th, but that's the same date as inauguration date. So we're just taking a little closer look at that to make sure that there wouldn't be any overlap in some of the timeframes for that, figuring that most people are going to probably want to watch. So we will get out the confirmation of the date soon. And then switching gears to the East Side plan, you remember Al Savay, our Community Development Director, gave a presentation at the last meeting, and answered some questions about that project that is now officially underway through an executed contract with the firm Perkins & Will, who will be assisting the city. We had our first kickoff meeting. We've had another meeting to talk about preparing a project website for that project as well. So we are moving forward with that. And based upon a preliminary schedule, it looks like we could be having our first workshop with the community on that project in early March. And I'm just throwing that out there to give you kind of a frame of reference on where that, could land as we move forward. But again, you might recall, this is a pretty quick process. We want to, get through this and do it well and get all we can out of the process. So we're really just hitting the ground running on that one. So just wanted to keep you updated on that. And I think that's it. So it could be that we won't see each other on the screen, but I'll definitely be in communication with the Planning Commission as to when we're having our next meeting and any dates coming forward about workshops or events that are starting to land on the calendar. I'll definitely be communicating with the Commission via email in sending those out as informational items. And I think that's all I have this evening, other than to wish you all a very, very happy holidays and a happy new year. And I can't believe we're at the end of 2020, but we made it. And so that feels good. And I'm looking forward to the new year and new projects. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Lisa. It's very helpful to know what's coming. And it looks like the first quarter of 2021 is going to be very full and busy and exciting. I'm looking forward to it. I'd like to echo also and wish everyone a very happy and a very safe and a very healthy holiday. And we'll see you, we are adjourned, and we'll see you next year. Thank you.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Dittos, and I'll keep you posted after since I'm in the old age group, I'll be the first one vaccinated and report to you later.
All right.
Be well.
Good. Happy holidays. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.